I smelt the smoke before I saw it, but when I did, what I found lying in the ashes was the flag I carried through 2 wars. Still folded, still burned, still mine. I'm Frank Delaney, retired Marine, and last month someone burned the flag off my front porch, not out of protest, but out of policy. See, where I live, we've got a homeowners association that cares more about visual harmony than they do about sacrifice. They called it emotional clutter. But for me, that flag was everything. It survived gunfire, sandstorms, and the loss of men I called brothers. And now it's gone, because of a committee that never served a day in uniform. But I didn't raise my hand in combat just to be erased in peacetime. So if you've ever wondered what happens when a veteran gets pushed too far, well, buckle up, because they tried to silence a Marine with a clipboard, and all they did was start a war on a porch. I was just stepping out for coffee. Quiet morning, no wind, no warnings, same old porch, same mug in my hand, same birds chirping off the wires like everything was fine. Then I smelled it. Not campfire, not charcoal. It was fabric. Fabric and lacquer and something else. Memory. The kind of smell that takes you back whether you want to go or not. I followed it around the side of the HOA office and found it. There in the dumpster, still trailing smoke like it had something left to say, was my flag. Not just a flag, my flag. The one that came home with me from Iraq, barely held together through 2 deployments and a Humvee fire. The one that used to sit on my porch every Memorial Day since we moved here. Framed, honored, protected. Now it sat curled, half burned, like someone had ripped a chapter out of my life and tossed it in with the recycling. I didn't scream, I didn't shake, I didn't curse. I just picked it up. The glass case was cracked down the middle, wood blackened, but the flag still held shape. Bent, scorched, but still folded like I'd last left it. You ever have a moment so surreal you forget where you are? Yeah. I was standing in a parking lot holding a burned flag, wondering when the war came home. I walked straight into the HOA office. Karen, pearls, clipboard, smug smile like she was running for mayor of a town no one asked to live in, looked up and said, "Oh, Frank, what a surprise." I held the flag case up. "This yours?" She blinked. "I'm sorry? This was on my porch. Now it's in your trash." Burned? I wasn't yelling. That's the scary part. I was steady. Karen tilted her head like I'd just brought back the wrong latte. "Well, we did have a board vote on decorative uniformity. Some displays, particularly outdated or emotionally charged ones, were marked for review." I said, "That's not a display. That's a flag. That's brothers I buried. That's blood." And she said without flinching, "Let's not get emotional, Frank." And that was it. That was the moment. When I stopped hoping they'd understand and started planning how to make sure they'd never forget. Because let me tell you something, if you think it's just a flag, you've never had to carry one off the battlefield. You've never folded one for a mother. You've never saluted one under enemy fire, hoping to make it home. So when you burn it, you're not just burning cloth. You're lighting a match to the past. And some of us, we don't burn. We ignite. If you've ever had something sacred disrespected, drop a comment below. If you believe our veterans deserve better than this, hit that like button. And if you're ready to follow this story all the way to the end, subscribe. You're going to want to see what happens next. They didn't call it censorship. They didn't call it erasure or disrespect or even vandalism. They called it aesthetic cohesion. I read those words straight from the violation notice, typed in 12-point Times New Roman, tucked neatly beneath a golden HOA seal that looked like it had been ripped off a bootleg sheriff's badge. And there it was again, in bold this time. Persistent refusal to comply with Maplecrest's visual harmony strategy. Visual harmony. Like burning a combat flag was just color-correcting a neighborhood palette. Karen and her clipboard army weren't just pushing rules. They were writing a new kind of manual, one where patriotism was clutter, sacrifice was unsightly, and history didn't match the siding. They had rewritten the bylaws last month, quietly. No meeting, no vote. Just uploaded it to the HOA portal at 3:47 a.m. You know, the time only raccoons and people with something to hide are awake. And suddenly, Clause 4.8 became the sword. It said, homeowners must maintain outdoor displays in compliance with community design language, removing emotionally polarizing imagery that conflicts with neighborhood tranquility. You know what else conflicts with neighborhood tranquility? War. But I didn't say that to Karen. Not yet. Instead, I called Teddy, told him to bring coffee, gloves, and a trash bag. He showed up with donuts, a lawn chair, and a smirk. This for a cleanup or a war council? He asked. I handed him the scorched frame. He stopped smiling. You kept this here for years, he said. Never once had a complaint. I nodded. Guess it finally clashed with the petunias. Over the next 48 hours, the letters came fast. Hers a second fine, $1,000 0 cents for non-conforming materials. Apparently, a flag burned by someone else on my own porch was still my fault. Second, a hand-delivered envelope from a teen intern who looked like he was being held hostage by khakis. Inside, an invitation to the next HOA meeting, with the words, mandatory attendance requested, agenda item 3B, community disciplinary review. I wasn't just being fined anymore. I was being put on trial by the same people who lit the match. And the cherry on top? Karen started walking her little dog past my house every morning. Pink leash, matching windbreaker. She'd pause right at the porch, smile just enough to make it legal, and keep walking. Dot didn't say a word. She didn't need to. That walk was a victory lap. But I wasn't planning to lose. Because see, HOAs can write all the rules they want. They can hide behind wording and visual standards and weaponize font sizes. But one thing they forgot, I've read enemy playbooks before, and every one of them starts the same way. First, they paint you as non-compliant. Then they isolate. Then they erase. But that only works if you let them. The flag, the fire, and the folder. How they tried to erase me. They tried to call it a violation. What they didn't realize was I still had the receipts. Literal ones. And what came next? That's where the fire really started. They didn't just come for the flag. They came for the entire story behind it. See, HOA drama usually ends at a nasty letter and a passive-aggressive bake sale. But this was different. This was personal. A few days after the second letter, I got something new. A glossy, tri-fold flyer in the mailbox, complete with clip art, doves, and the tagline, preserving peace and aesthetic order in our growing community. Harmless, right? Until I flipped to page 2. There I was, my porch, my flag, my name, blurred just enough to avoid a lawsuit, but not enough to miss the message. Certain residents continue to reject the shared visual identity of Maple Crest. In times of unrest, it is our duty to address discord, even if it wears a uniform. Yeah, that's when I knew. I wasn't just a non-compliant homeowner, I was officially Maple Crest's enemy of harmony. They had turned a veteran, a man who bled under that flag, who buried friends wrapped in it, who came home just looking for a porch and some quiet, into a symbol of disruption. And worse, some of my neighbors were starting to believe it. Mrs. Fletcher stopped waving. Mr. Ellsworth, who once borrowed my ladder, crossed the street like HOA guilt was contagious. Even the mailman stopped making eye contact, which, to be fair, is kind of his whole thing. But still, I didn't say a word. I just watched the pieces move and let them think I hadn't noticed. Because while Karen was busy building a narrative, I was building a case. Teddy and I started gathering everything. Emails, memos, old meeting minutes, even drone footage Karen's husband had accidentally flown over my backyard. We may or may not have launched a Nerf dart with a cease and desist tape to it. And then came the third wave. This one hurt more than the fine. It was a map. Internal HOA planning document. Phase 2 strategic beautification. Every house had a color. Red meant non-compliant. Red meant priority transition. And mine was bright red, labeled persistent refusal, recommend enforcement. Under that, Mr. Lee, Vietnam vet, Mrs. Rodriguez, Navy widow, the Jamesons, retired Army medics. You see the pattern yet? They weren't just targeting cluttered yards, they were targeting us. Veterans, older folks, people with flags, plaques, memories, people with history. They wanted a clean slate. But clean meant scrubbed, unified meant erased, and harmony, that just meant quiet obedience. But here's the thing about porch warriors. We don't march. We don't shout. We stand, quiet, Still, stubborn, and sometimes that's louder than anything they've got. The setup and the strike. Fake fines, real damage. They didn't just want me out, they wanted me broken. But what they forgot was that I'd already been through fire once, and this time, I'd brought backup. I've seen war rooms before. Big ones, sandbagged ones with blinking red lights and maps that smelled like sweat and sand. But this time, this one had a porch swing, a coffee ring on the tabletop, and a 12-pack of highlighters stolen from Teddy's garage. Our war room was the front porch. It started with a cork board. Linda brought it out like she was setting the dinner table. Teddy followed with a printer under his arm like it was a newborn. Then came the folders, HOA emails, violation notices, map overlays, Karen's smug newsletter, now pinned like a wanted poster, and in the middle, the burnt flag case, not as a symbol of defeat, but as a rally point. We didn't talk much that first afternoon, just highlighted phrases like emotionally polarizing and unified aesthetic strategy, just underlined fines, circled inconsistencies, stuck thumbtacks in timelines. At some point, Teddy said, "You realize this looks like a Netflix doc waiting to happen?" I nodded. Working title? The HOA Who Poked the Marine. That night, I sat on the porch long after the others went to bed. Wind in the trees, porch light humming, the corkboard in front of me like an old mission brief. But this mission, it wasn't about territory or defense lines. It was about memory. My flag, my story, my right to remember things out loud. Linda came out and set a blanket on my shoulders. "You thinking about the desert?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, I'm thinking about the last time someone underestimated me." She didn't smile. Didn't need to. Just squeezed my shoulder once and went back inside. The next morning, Monroe called. Old squad mate, now retired intelligence, half mountain man, half conspiracy bloodhound. "You ready?" he asked. "Getting there," I replied. "You've got 3 fronts," he said. "Optics, legal, structural. When 2, you don't need the 3rd. That night, we added another board. Printed HOA maps, colored push pins, cross-reference planning meetings with real estate transfers. Teddy labeled one section, Operation Clipboard Crackdown, because yeah, Karen may have had fines and bylaws. But I had a battle-tested team and a living room with better Wi-Fi. We weren't rushing. We were setting the bait. Let them think they were still in control. Let Karen plan her next move, smug in her little power suit and pastel passive aggression. We were going to let them walk into their own trap. But in the middle of planning, I found myself staring at one thing, that damn burnt flag case. Blackened edges, cracked glass, still holding on. And I realized I'd been holding back. Not out of fear, but out of something deeper. Restraint. Because sometimes when you've seen enough fire, you learn to wait before lighting a match. But once you light it, you burn the whole damn blueprint down. Transition fake orders, real consequences. When the HOA went too far, they wanted to scare me into silence. What they did instead was sign their own warrant, and the next thing I caught was all on camera. You ever hit upload and feel the ground shift? I didn't plan on going viral. I didn't even really plan on going public. But after the 3rd fake notice and a restraining order that made me sound like a porch-dwelling warlord with a sniper nest, I figured it was time. Time to let the world know what was really going on in our picture-perfect neighborhood of mulch beds and manicured tyranny. Teddy was the one who said it out loud. "You know what they fear more than court?" He paused, holding his phone up like Excalibur. The comment section. So we launched what I now call Operation Optics. 90-second video. Just me, my porch, the burnt flag, and the line. They didn't just find me, they tried to erase me. Then I stepped aside and let the documents speak. .OA fines, the restraining order, the internal HOA document with my house labeled non-compliant asset, and finally, zoomed-in screenshots of the HOA Zoom meeting. Karen's voice saying, "He's just a porch warrior with PTSD, break him in steps." That one? Yeah, that was the hammer. The video went live on a Sunday morning. By Sunday afternoon, it had 40,000 views. By dinner, TikTok edits. memes, Facebook threads. One Marine vet from Ohio stitched the video with his own flag, saying, "They come for one of us, they come for all of us." Hashtag started trending, porch warrior. Burnt but unbroken. HOA reform now. Someone even made a t-shirt with Teddy's face on it that said, "This smells like HOA drama and old yogi." He ordered 6. The best part? People dug deep. One retired journalist posted a full breakdown of HOA abuse cases across the country. One user exposed Karen's husband's ties to the Crestline Development Group. Wrote a thread titled "Gentrification by Fines, the Hidden." Another veteran found 23 other flagged homes in the country under strategic beautification policies. We weren't the only ones. We were just the first ones to say no loud enough. Locally, things got even wilder. A group of teens drove past my house blaring "Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue." Mr. Lee put his mural back up. Mrs. Rodriguez set out her Navy Cook's plaque and dared someone to take it. 11 Paul, the treasurer, left a single sticky note on my mailbox. Some of us were scared. Not anymore. But Karen doubled down. She released a community statement calling the video emotional misinformation and accusing me of instigating unrest. It ended with a line that made Teddy spit his coffee. "This is not a battle, it's a misunderstanding," Teddy muttered. "Lady, you dropped the first match and now you're mad the fire got hot." That night, as I sat on the porch watching the sun fade across the flagpole, Linda came out, set down a fresh mug of tea and said, "You know, for someone who didn't want to go public, you're starting a movement." I didn't answer. I just watched the stars come out and waited for the next letter. Because I knew it was coming, and I knew we were finally ready. Next up, we take it to the town hall. Transition 2. Town hall takedown. When truth enters the room in uniform. They thought I'd fold. Instead, I walked in with a uniform, a case file, and a flag they couldn't burn twice. Some folks go to war with rifles. I went with receipts. While Karen was busy typing emotional disorderly conduct in Comic Sans on her next violation notice, we were building a case thick enough to stun an elephant. We weren't just defending ourselves anymore. We were going on offense. Teddy turned my garage into a mission ops center. One wall for documents, one for digital evidence, one purely dedicated to HOA nonsense. Quotes in bold Sharpie, my personal favorite: "We must enforce visual harmony even if residents find it emotionally destabilizing," Linda wrote under it. Translation: "You're allowed to grieve, just not in beige." Monroe worked remotely from Idaho, his voice slicing through speakerphone like a hot knife through HOA hypocrisy. Avery Dent, our lawyer, ex-JAG turned civic bulldog, joined daily Zoom calls from her office in D.C. She didn't talk much, but when she did, HOA bylaws folded like origami. She called it weaponizing the code book. "You know how she got power?" Avery said one afternoon. "She used the rules to erase stories." Then she paused. "We're going to use those same rules to tell the truth." We started with pattern of abuse. 27 citations against veterans in the last 2 years. 19 fines issued for political symbolism. 11 flags removed. 1 porch forcibly painted. Then came the discovery bombshell. Karen had quietly rewritten the bylaws in a private board session, without public notice or majority vote. That's illegal in 42 states, especially when she used the new language to trigger forced property reassessments and backdoor real estate transfers to a development firm linked to, drumroll, her husband's portfolio. America was not just dealing with bad taste in lawn chairs anymore. This was full-blown gentrification by clipboard. Avery filed the first formal complaint by Tuesday. Count 1. Unlawful amendment of community governance. Count 2. Targeted harassment under color of law. Count 3. Misappropriation of authority for personal gain. Count 4. Suppression of protected symbolism. The court date was set. We even had a judge who, according to Monroe, once ruled in favor of a woman flying a 30-foot Betsy Ross flag because this is still America, not a strip mall. Karen, meanwhile, filed a counterbrief alleging ongoing threats to community cohesion. She used the phrase porch militia 3 times. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my mug. But here's the twist. We didn't stop at court. We went public legal. Avery helped us file a petition to revoke the HOA's charter, citing abuse of authority and breach of fiduciary duty. It was bold, it was messy, and it got everyone's attention. The local news showed up, then regional. One reporter, bless her, stood outside Karen's house and said, "The real question isn't who's running the neighborhood, it's who they're running out." Karen refused to comment. But Paul, the HOA treasurer, snuck me a handwritten note. I thought we were enforcing peace. I didn't realize we were erasing people. The pressure worked. 2 board members resigned. 3 residents withdrew their HOA dues pending audit. And on the day of our court hearing, we didn't just walk in with documents. We walked in with a dozen community members, 2 Marine vets, a local pastor, and a box full of printed HOA violations in color-coded folders. Karen came alone. No clipboard, no smirk, just sunglasses too big for her face. That day I realized something. They tried to make the rules our prison, but rules are just paper, and paper burns, but the law, when you hold it right, it becomes armor. Transition to town hall takedown. When truth enters the room in uniform. She wrote me off as a porch warrior. She forgot some of us don't need a battlefield to win. It felt like walking into a courtroom and a high school reunion at the same time. Only difference? This time, I wasn't the one on trial. The community center was packed. Folding chairs lined every wall, and folks stood 2 deep along the back. People I hadn't seen in months. Some I hadn't even liked much before. Now nodded quietly as I passed, like we were sharing some unspoken truth, like the flag meant something to them, too. Teddy was already there, live streaming from his phone like a war correspondent with a caffeine habit. "All right, Internet," he whispered into the mic. "Today we find out if justice wears a cardigan or a Kevlar vest." Linda walked beside me, calm and steady. No makeup, no speech prepared. Just that stare, the kind you only see on women who spent too long watching someone they love get pushed around. And me? Full dress blues. Medals, boots polished so clean you could have seen Karen's reflection in them if she'd dared to look. At the front, Karen sat at the HOA table, flanked by the few board members who hadn't jumped ship yet. Her clipboard was back, so was her smirk. But the blazer? Today it was pale yellow, like she was trying to convince the world she was sunshine. She wasn't. She was the storm, and the whole room was about to hear the thunder. The HOA president started with something bland. Agenda items, committee notes, a flower bed complaint. Then he said the words, Item 3B, Neighborhood Harmony and Pending Disciplinary Review. Karen immediately leaned forward, reaching for her mic. But before she could speak, I stood up, walked to the front, set the scorched flag case on the podium like it was the foundation of the Constitution itself. And I said, before you talk about harmony, you better define what you mean by it. The room went quiet. Karen's mic was still on. She cleared her throat, slow and syrupy. This meeting is not meant to be political. We're here to address violations. You mean like burning a veteran's flag? I asked, still calm. That was a misunderstanding, she snapped, just a little too fast. No, I said, and tapped the glass case. This was a message Teddy zoomed in with his phone. You could hear the quiet ping of live stream hearts. Behind me, someone stood up. Mrs. Rodriguez, widow of a Navy cook, tiny woman, spine like steel. She raised a printed HOA citation. They fined me for wind chimes, she said softly. Said they disrupted the aesthetic. Then Mr. Park, Air Force, cane in hand. He didn't speak, he just lifted his empty flag bracket and held it in the air. Karen started to interrupt. We're not here to rehash personal disputes. No, I said again. You're here to enforce erasure, and I'm here to stop it. Avery Dent, our attorney, stood at the back in black slacks and calm fury. This HOA violated state code, she said, projecting her voice across the room. Bylaws amended without community consent. Discriminatory fines issued, and homeowners targeted for symbolic expression protected under federal law. Karen's voice wobbled. This is harassment. I was following procedure. And that's when Monroe's voice came through the portable speaker. Deep, clear, and steady. The problem with following broken procedures is you end up leading people off cliffs. Then Paul stood up. HOA treasurer, the one who gave us the internal folder, his hands were shaking. She told us veterans were bad optics. The room gasped. Karen's face turned pale. "Paul," she hissed. "You said you wouldn't. You said they'd never fight back," he replied. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a folded flag, the back up clean and whole, and unfolded it slowly. The room stood. One by one. No music. No announcement. Just respect. Mr. Lee saluted. Mrs. Rodriguez placed her hand on her heart. Even some of the younger folks, those who'd only ever seen war on TV, stood silent. Karen stayed seated, clipboard shaking. "This is my protest," I said. "This is my country, and you will not erase me from it." Transition to legacy on the porch when peace finally comes home, because sometimes the loudest victory is the one that finally lets you sleep through the night. It was the quiet that got me first, not silence. Not the kind that presses on your chest after bad news, but real quiet. The kind you choose, the kind you build a life around, the kind that says, "You're home now." That morning, for the first time in what felt like forever, the porch creaked for all the right reasons. Old wood, fresh coffee, no summons taped to the door, just a breeze and the sound of Linda humming something wordless in the kitchen. I stood barefoot at the edge of the porch, flag in hand, not scorched, not hidden, not argued over, just folded, clean, whole. My fingers ran over the edges one last time before I reached up and slid it into the new bracket. Stainless steel, bolted straight into the heart of the house. No more cracked glass, no more fear, just sky, wind, and the red, white, and blue catching the light. Linda stepped outside, her sweater draped over one shoulder. "Looks right," she said softly. I nodded. She didn't need to say more. That was her way, always had been. The old porch chair creaked again as I sat. Same spot I'd watched them try to take everything that mattered, bit by bit, inch by inch. But now it was ours again. Teddy showed up a little before noon with a 6-pack of root beer and a victory grin. "Brought the good stuff," he said. "Thought we'd christen the peace." He sat beside me, handed me a bottle, and clinked glass against glass like we were toasting at the end of a deployment. We didn't talk about the HOA, or the charges, or Karen. We didn't need to. She'd moved out 2 weeks ago. The clipboard left behind in the trash like a discarded script from a play no one wanted to see again. And the flag? It stayed. Not for protest, not for provocation, but for presence. A symbol that didn't need defending anymore. Kids rode by on bikes. One of them, maybe 10 years old, slowed and saluted the flag like he'd seen someone else do it once. Dot didn't say a word. Didn't look at me, just saluted, rode on. That one moment hit harder than any court ruling, because respect like that, that's earned, not demanded. Linda sat next to me a while later. Teddy had wandered off to check on the brisket, which was his way of giving us space. She leaned against me. "Feels different," she said. "It is. You okay now?" I thought about it. Thought about the nights on this very porch, watching shadows move like ghosts. The anger, the loss, the feeling that maybe peace was for someone else. Then I looked at the flag. Still, whole, flying free. "Yeah," I said. "I think I finally made it home." If you've stuck with me through this story, thank you. This wasn't just about flags and clipboards and HOA bylaws. It was about memory, dignity, and the fight to keep what matters when no one else sees it. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment, share it with a vet you respect, and don't forget to subscribe, because the next chapter we tell might be yours. And to everyone who's ever saluted a flag in silence, fought a battle no one else saw, or rebuilt peace one porch board at a time, you're not alone, not now, not ever. Because sometimes the loudest victories don't come with applause, they come with stillness. And the soft sound of fabric catching wind.